The smoke-filled warehouse reeked of motor oil and danger as Jake "Roadkill" Morrison chained his newest purchase to the clubhouse wall. The German Shepherd he'd bought for $50 at the police auction was supposed to be a simple guard dog, nothing more. But when 3 black SUVs rolled up at midnight, everything changed. The dog didn't bark. Instead, it moved like liquid death, disabling the first intruder with surgical precision before Jake even reached for his gun. As bodies hit the concrete floor, Jake's blood ran cold. He recognized those moves, military kill techniques he'd learned 15 years ago in special ops before faking his own death. The animal turned to him with intelligent eyes that seemed to say, "Your secret's out, soldier." Someone had trained this dog to hunt men like Jake, men who knew too much about Operation Black Crown, men the government wanted permanently silenced. The question was, had they sent the dog to protect him or eliminate him? Jake's hands trembled as he stared at the motionless figures sprawled across the oil-stained concrete. The shepherd sat perfectly still, amber eyes locked on his face, waiting. Blood roared in his ears as memories he'd buried deep began clawing their way to the surface. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, running a shaking hand through his graying beard. The warehouse felt smaller suddenly, the shadows deeper. 15 years of carefully constructed lies, Jake Morrison, the ex-con turned club enforcer, crumbled in an instant. The dog's ears twitched at approaching footsteps. Jake spun toward the side entrance as Diesel, the club's sergeant-at-arms, burst through the door with 2 other members close behind. "Boss, we heard." Diesel's words died as he took in the scene. 3 bodies in tactical gear, weapons scattered across the floor, and their supposedly new guard dog sitting calmly beside the carnage like some 4-legged angel of death. What the hell happened here? Tommy Wrench Rodriguez stepped carefully around a pool of blood, his weathered face twisted in confusion. Jake's mind raced. These men had followed him through prison riots and territorial wars, but they knew nothing about Marcus Cole, the Special Forces operative who'd supposedly died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. The man Jake had been before he became Jake. "Intruders," he managed, forcing his voice steady. "Dog took them down before I could react." Diesel crouched beside one of the bodies, examining the precise throat wound that had dropped the man instantly. "This ain't normal, Jake. What kind of guard dog does this?" The shepherd's gaze never wavered from Jake's face. Those intelligent eyes held secrets and perhaps answers. Someone had placed this animal at that auction, knowing Jake would be there, knowing he'd see a bargain and take the bait. "Check their gear," Jake ordered, desperate to deflect attention from the growing questions in his men's eyes. "See if they're carrying ID." Wrench rifled through tactical vests, pulling out electronic devices Jake recognized, but hoped the others wouldn't. Encrypted communications equipment, military-grade weapons, the kind of hardware Black Ops teams used for permanent solutions to problematic individuals. "No ID, but look at this." Diesel held up a photograph that made Jake's blood freeze. It was him, but 15 years younger, in desert fatigues with his old unit. The image he'd thought was destroyed along with every other trace of Marcus Cole's existence. "Boss?" Diesel's voice carried a dangerous edge. "You want to explain why these boys have your picture?" The warehouse fell silent except for the distant rumble of highway traffic. Jake could feel everything balancing on a knife's edge. His brotherhood with these men, his carefully constructed life, his very survival, all of it hanging in the balance of whatever words came next. The shepherd stood and padded toward him, moving with that same fluid grace that had dispatched 3 trained killers. It stopped beside Jake's leg, and for a moment he could swear he felt understanding pass between them. 2 soldiers recognizing each other across species and circumstances. "It's a long story," Jake said finally. "We got time," Diesel replied, though his hand had drifted toward the pistol on his hip. Before Jake could respond, the dog's head snapped toward the main entrance, ears erect. A low growl rumbled from its throat, the first sound it had made all evening. Outside, engines approached, multiple vehicles moving fast and coordinated. Jake's pulse hammered as he counted the approaching headlights through grimy windows. 6 vehicles this time, forming a perimeter around the warehouse. Whatever operation these people were running, the first team had been just the opening move. The dog looked up at him again, and Jake realized with startling clarity that it wasn't waiting for orders. It was asking a question. Are you ready to remember who you really are? As tactical lights blazed through the windows and boots hit gravel outside, Jake Morrison began to die. What emerged from 15 years of carefully maintained lies was something far more dangerous. Marcus Cole was about to wake up. The morning sun cast long shadows across Jake's scrapyard as he watched the German Shepherd methodically patrol the perimeter fence. 3 days had passed since the auction, and the dog hadn't behaved like any guard animal he'd ever seen. Instead of random barking or aggressive posturing, it moved with calculated precision, checking specific points along the fence line at exact 15-minute intervals. Jake sipped his black coffee and observed from the porch of his trailer. The dog would pause at each corner post, ears rotating like radar dishes, then proceed to the next checkpoint. Military precision, he realized with growing unease. This wasn't guard dog behavior, this was reconnaissance. What the hell are you? He muttered, stubbing out his cigarette. The shepherd's head snapped toward him instantly, yellow eyes locking onto his position 50 yards away. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. The animal had heard him despite the distance and ambient noise from the highway. Those weren't normal ears. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Yeah? Mr. Morrison? This is Detective Sarah Chen, Metro PD. I'm calling about the dog you purchased at our auction last week. Jake's grip tightened on the phone. What about it? We need to discuss that purchase. Are you available this morning? Depends. What's this about? A pause. I'd rather discuss this in person. I can be at your location within the hour. The line went dead before Jake could respond. He stared at the phone, his instincts screaming warnings honed by years of dodging trouble. Cops didn't make house calls about routine auction purchases unless something was seriously wrong. The shepherd had moved closer during the call, positioning itself between Jake and the front gate. Its stance wasn't aggressive but alert, like a soldier awaiting orders. You expecting company, boy? Jake asked. The dog's ears twitched at the sound of approaching vehicles before Jake heard anything. 2 cars, the shepherd's body language suggested, moving fast on the access road. Jake squinted toward the gate and saw dust clouds rising in the distance. His military training, buried under 20 years of civilian life, suddenly surfaced. Something was off, Detective Chen had said within the hour, but these vehicles were arriving in minutes. Either she was early or these weren't cops. The shepherd began moving toward the trailer, herding Jake toward cover. The behavior was unmistakable, protection protocol. Jake didn't argue. He retreated into the trailer and grabbed his .45 from the kitchen drawer, muscle memory guiding his movements. Through the window, he watched 2 black SUVs roll through his open gate without invitation, not cop cars. The windows were too dark, the approach too coordinated. 4 men emerged, dressed in casual clothes that didn't quite hide their military bearing. Jake recognized the type. Contractors, mercs, the kind of people who asked questions with bullets. The shepherd had vanished. Jake Morrison, the lead man called out, scanning the yard with practiced eyes. We need to talk. Jake remained silent, watching from behind the trailer's reinforced door. These men weren't here for conversation. Their hands rested near concealed weapons, and they moved with the coordinated precision of a tactical team. We know you're here, Morrison. We just want the dog. Hand it over, and we'll leave peacefully. The dog. This was about the shepherd. But how did they know he had it? The auction had been public record, but these men had arrived less than a week later, armed and dangerous. Someone had been watching. A shadow moved past the window, the shepherd circling behind the intruders. Jake caught glimpses of black and tan fur weaving between abandoned cars and scrap piles with supernatural stealth. The animal wasn't fleeing, it was hunting. Morrison. Last chance. The lead man gestured to his team. They began advancing on the trailer, weapons drawn. Jake counted 4 hostiles, spread in a tactical formation that spoke of professional training. Whoever wanted the dog back had sent serious operators. The attack came without warning. The shepherd emerged from behind a rusted Buick like a shadow-given form, striking the rear guard with surgical precision. The man's scream cut short as canine jaws found his throat. The animal rolled away before his teammates could react, disappearing into the maze of scrap metal. Contact rear. Dog is hostile. Jake used the distraction to slip out the trailer's back door, 45 ready. The remaining 3 men had their backs to him, focused on hunting the shepherd. Big mistake. Looking for something? Jake called out. They spun toward his voice, but the shepherd was already moving again. It hit the second man from the side, 70 pounds of trained killing machine driving him into a stack of tire rims. The impact echoed across the yard like a gunshot. The lead man fired wild shots into the scrap piles while his remaining partner tried to maintain overwatch. Neither saw Jake flanking wide to their left, using cover techniques he hadn't employed since Afghanistan. Whatever this dog was, whoever had trained it, Jake was beginning to understand why someone wanted it back badly enough to send killers. The animal wasn't just military trained. It was a weapon, and now they were partners in a fight Jake didn't understand but intended to win. The morning sun cast long shadows across Jake's salvage yard as he walked the perimeter fence, checking for weak spots. Rex padded silently beside him, those intelligent eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. 3 days had passed since the incident at Murphy's, and Jake couldn't shake the feeling they were being watched. "You're making me paranoid, boy," he muttered, though he appreciated having backup for once. The dog's presence had already proved invaluable. Twice Rex had alerted him to potential customers trying to case the place, and once to a raccoon family that had taken up residence in his parts shed. The distant rumble of motorcycles made both man and dog freeze. Rex's ears pricked forward, a low growl building in his throat. Jake counted the engines, 3 bikes, maybe 4, approaching fast. His hand instinctively moved to the .45 tucked under his leather jacket. "Easy," he whispered to Rex, though the dog had already shifted into what Jake was learning to recognize as tactical mode. The animal's entire posture changed, muscles coiled like springs, head lowered, moving with predatory grace. The bikes roared into view, 4 Harleys with riders he didn't recognize. They wore no club colors, which immediately raised red flags. Bikers without patches were either wannabes or professionals trying to blend in. These men moved with too much precision to be wannabes. They pulled up to the gate, engines idling. The lead rider, a lean man with military bearing despite his beard and leathers, dismounted and approached the fence. "Jake Morrison?" Jake kept his distance, Rex a shadow at his side. "Depends who's asking." "Name's Carter. I'm looking for something that went missing. Thought you might be able to help." Carter's eyes flicked to Rex, and Jake caught a flash of recognition before the man's expression went neutral again. "I sell scrap metal and motorcycle parts. Nothing else. Heard you picked up some interesting items at the police auction last week." Carter took a step closer to the fence. "Including a dog." The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. Rex wasn't just any military working dog. He was stolen property, or worse, he was evidence of something these men wanted to keep buried. "Don't know what you're talking about," Jake said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Carter smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Mr. Morrison, that animal represents a significant government investment. We're here to reclaim federal property." "You got paperwork?" "We don't need paperwork." Carter nodded to his companions, who began dismounting. "National security trumps local ownership laws." Rex tensed, a barely audible whine escaping his throat. Jake recognized it as the same sound the dog had made before taking down Murphy's attacker. Whatever training this animal had received, it was kicking in now. "Here's the thing," Jake said, backing slowly toward his shop. "I bought that dog legal and square. You want him, you go through proper channels." Afraid we can't do that. Carter produced a pistol from beneath his jacket. The dog knows things, saw things, can't have him falling into the wrong hands. Jake's blood ran cold. They weren't here to reclaim Rex, they were here to eliminate him, and probably Jake too, for good measure. Rex, Jake said quietly. Showtime. The dog exploded into motion faster than Jake's eye could follow. Rex hit the chain-link fence at a dead run, his powerful legs propelling him up and over the 8-foot barrier like it was a minor inconvenience. Carter barely had time to shout before 100 pounds of trained killer slammed into his chest. Jake drew his .45 and dove behind a rusted car frame as gunfire erupted. He caught glimpses of Rex moving between the motorcycles like a furry tornado, using the bikes for cover while systematically taking down Carter's men. The dog's training was beyond anything Jake had imagined. This wasn't just attack training, this was battlefield tactics. One gunman went down screaming. Rex's jaws clamped around his wrist. Another tried to flee and found himself flat on his back with the dog's teeth at his throat. Carter rolled behind his Harley, shouting orders that no one was in position to follow. Jake flanked wide, using his knowledge of the salvage yard's layout to his advantage. He put 2 rounds into Carter's bike, destroying the radio equipment mounted on the handlebars. "Call off your dog," Carter yelled. "We can work something out." "I don't negotiate with men who come to kill my dog," Jake shouted back. Rex had the last gunman pinned, maintaining perfect control despite the chaos. The animal looked to Jake for direction, awaiting orders with professional calm. "Who sent you?" Jake demanded, his pistol trained on Carter. "You have no idea what you're mixed up in, Morrison. That dog was part of a classified program. People died to keep those secrets buried." "What kind of program?" Carter's hand moved toward something on his belt. Rex snarled a warning, but the man's fingers found what they were looking for, a small device that began blinking red. Jake's military instincts screamed danger. "Rex, come!" The explosion that followed would leave more questions than answers. The scream came at 3:17 a.m. Jake's eyes snapped open, his hand already reaching for the Colt. .45 he kept under his pillow. The sound had been brief, cut off abruptly, but it was enough to flood his system with adrenaline. He'd heard that particular kind of scream before, the kind that came when someone realized they were about to die. Beside his bed, Ranger was already standing, ears forward, muscles coiled. The dog's hackles were raised, forming a ridge of bristling fur down his spine. A low growl rumbled in his chest, barely audible but vibrating with deadly intent. Jake slipped from the bed, bare feet silent on the cold floorboards. Through the grimy window he could see shapes moving between the rusted hulks of cars in his junkyard. 3 figures, maybe 4, advancing with military precision through the maze of automotive corpses. Professional, coordinated, lethal, the kind of people he'd hoped never to see again. His mind raced backward 25 years to a humid jungle where he'd learned to move like these men were moving now, where he'd been the one stalking through hostile territory with a team at his back and violence in his heart. The memories came flooding back with crystal clarity, memories he'd drowned in whiskey and buried under the noise of his Harley's engine. Ranger padded to the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. The dog's behavior had changed completely from the confused, listless animal Jake had brought home. This was a predator assessing threats, calculating angles of attack. This was a soldier. Jake grabbed his jeans from the floor, pulling them on while keeping his gun trained on the window. "Easy, boy," he whispered, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to the dog or himself. A soft scratching sound came from the front door. Not knocking, someone was working on the lock. Jake felt his lips pull back in a grim smile. Amateurs would have kicked it in. These professionals wanted to maintain the element of surprise. He counted heartbeats, timing their approach. Ranger had moved to the bedroom doorway, positioned to see both the front and back entrances of the small house. The dog's tactical awareness was uncanny, as if he'd been trained for exactly this scenario. The front door whispered open. Jake held his breath, finger on the trigger. Through the thin walls, he could hear the soft footfalls of at least 2 intruders. They moved with practiced silence, but his ears had been trained in the same schools. Each tiny sound painted a picture in his mind, one heading toward the kitchen, another toward the hallway. Ranger's head turned slightly, tracking movement Jake couldn't hear. The dog's nose twitched, processing scents that told their own story. Then, so quietly Jake almost missed it, Ranger moved forward into the hallway. The first gunshot shattered the night silence. Jake rolled from the bed as bullets punched through the bedroom wall where his head had been seconds before. Splinters of wood and chunks of drywall rained down as automatic weapons fire raked the room. A human scream echoed from the front of the house, followed by sounds Jake recognized. The wet tearing of flesh, the crash of a body hitting furniture, the clatter of a weapon hitting the floor. Ranger was working. Jake low-crawled to the bedroom doorway and peered around the corner. In the dim light filtering through dirty windows, he saw a figure in black tactical gear writhing on the floor, clutching a throat that was no longer properly connected to his windpipe. Blood pooled beneath him in the moonlight. Ranger crouched nearby, muzzle dark with blood, watching another intruder who had pressed himself against the kitchen doorframe. The man's weapon was trained on the dog, but his hands were shaking. Professional or not, watching your teammate get his throat torn out by what looked like an ordinary German shepherd had a way of rattling a person's nerves. "Drop it," Jake commanded from the hallway, his .45 centered on the man's head. The intruder spun toward Jake's voice, finger tightening on the trigger of his submachine gun. He never got the chance to fire. Ranger launched himself across the room with the speed and silence of a missile. 60 pounds of trained killer hitting the gunman's center mass. They went down together, but only one of them got back up. The house fell silent except for the sound of Jake's ragged breathing and the soft panting of the dog. Ranger sat next to the second body, tongue lolling out as if he'd just finished a pleasant game of fetch. Jake moved through the house systematically, checking corners and shadows. 2 bodies, both carrying military-grade weapons and wearing no identification. Their gear was top shelf, the kind of equipment that came with government budgets and classified clearances. He knelt next to Ranger, running his hands through the dog's fur, checking for wounds. Nothing but blood that belonged to other people. "What the hell are you, boy?" Jake whispered. Ranger's response was to walk to the front door and sit, ears alert, as if waiting for the next wave of attackers. The morning sun cast long shadows across the scrapyard as Jake worked under the hood of a '92 Harley, his hands already black with grease despite the early hour. Rex lay nearby, ears swiveling at every sound that drifted over the chain-link fence. The dog had been restless all night, pacing the small apartment above the shop, pausing occasionally at windows to stare into the darkness. Jake had barely slept either. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those tactical movements Rex had displayed, the way the dog had positioned himself like a trained soldier. It reminded him too much of things he'd tried to forget, missions in places that didn't officially exist, working alongside handlers and their specialized canines. The wrench slipped in his grip, skinning his knuckles against the engine block. Damn it! He sucked the blood from his hand and glanced at Rex, who was now standing at full attention, staring toward the front gate. Jake heard it then, the low rumble of multiple motorcycles approaching. His stomach tightened. He knew that sound, the synchronized purr of well-maintained Harleys ridden by men who meant business. Through the gaps in stacked car parts, he could make out 3 bikes pulling up to his gate. The engines cut off in unison. Jake wiped his hands on a rag, his mind automatically cataloguing escape routes and potential weapons within reach. Old habits died hard, even after 15 years of trying to live quietly. "Jake? Morrison?" The voice carried across the yard, gravelly and authoritative. Jake stepped around the car he'd been working on, Rex moving to heel position without command. 3 men stood at his gate, their leather cuts marking them as members of the Iron Wolves MC. Jake recognized the club. They ran territory about 50 miles south, dealt in the kind of business that attracted federal attention. The man who'd spoken was built like a bulldozer, grey beard braided with steel rings. His patches marked him as the club's sergeant-at-arms. The two flanking him were younger, hungrier, hands resting casually near the bulges under their jackets. "Depends who's asking," Jake replied, staying 20 feet back from the gate. "Name's Kruger. We're looking for something that belongs to us. Heard you picked up a dog at the police auction yesterday." Jake's pulse quickened, but he kept his expression neutral. "Bought a dog, yeah. What's it to you?" Kruger's smile held no warmth. "See, that particular animal has sentimental value to our organization. We're prepared to compensate you for your trouble." One of the younger bikers shifted his weight, and Rex's hackles rose slightly. The dog had moved almost imperceptibly, positioning himself at an angle that would give him a clear attack vector on all three men while providing cover for Jake. It was a movement so subtle and tactical that Jake doubted the bikers noticed, but it sent ice through his veins. "Dog's not for sale," Jake said. "Got attached to him already." Kruger's expression hardened. "This ain't a negotiation, Morrison. We know about you. Delta Force, discharged under questionable circumstances, been keeping your head down, running this little grease monkey operation. Be a shame if your quiet life got complicated." The mention of his military service confirmed Jake's worst fears. Whatever Rex was involved in, it had tentacles reaching into his own buried past. The Iron Wolves weren't just random bikers looking for a lost pet. They were connected to something bigger. "You boys are trespassing," Jake said, his voice dropping to the tone that had once commanded respect from hardened soldiers. "Time to move along." The younger biker on the left took a step forward, his hand moving toward his waistband. Rex's body coiled like a spring, a low growl rumbling in his chest that somehow managed to sound more predatory than any wolf. Kruger held up a hand, stopping his man's advance. His eyes flicked between Jake and Rex, reassessing. "You're making a mistake, Morrison. There are people involved in this who make us look like choir boys. Hand over the dog, and you can go back to your nice, boring life." "Counteroffer," Jake said. "Leave now, and I won't set my dog loose on you." For a long moment, the only sound was wind rattling through the scrap metal. Kruger studied Jake's face, then looked down at Rex, whose yellow eyes tracked every micro-movement the bikers made. "This ain't over," Kruger finally said. He jerked his head toward his companions, and they began backing toward their bikes. 24 hours, Morrison. After that, we come back with more persuasive friends." The Harleys roared to life, kicking up dust as they pulled away. Jake watched until they disappeared around the corner, then knelt beside Rex, running his fingers through the dog's thick fur. "What kind of trouble were you into, boy?" he murmured. Rex looked up at him with those intelligent eyes, and Jake could swear he saw an apology there, mixed with something else, a recognition that their quiet life together had just ended before it really began. The attack came from 3 directions simultaneously. Muzzle flashes erupted from behind a rusted container to the east. Jake rolled behind his bike as bullets sparked off concrete and metal. Rex vanished into the shadows like smoke, his black coat making him invisible against the industrial landscape. Jake counted at least 4 shooters, their movements coordinated and professional, not street thugs or gang members. These were operators. "Down, boy," Jake shouted, more for the benefit of their attackers than for Rex. Let them think they were dealing with an ordinary biker and his pet. A figure in tactical gear rounded Jake's position, rifle raised. He never saw Rex coming. The dog materialized from the darkness, 80 pounds of muscle and training hitting the operative's center mass. The man's scream cut short as Rex's jaws found his throat with surgical precision. Jake used the distraction to advance, moving between containers in a pattern that would have made his old drill sergeant proud. These weren't the same amateurs from the motorcycle shop. Someone had upgraded the opposition. 2 more operatives tried to flank him from the north. Jake put 3 rounds center mass into the first one, but the second dove behind cover and started laying down, suppressing fire. The rounds weren't random spray and pray, they were precisely placed to pin Jake in position while someone else moved to finish him. Rex appeared behind the shooter like a furry nightmare. The operative spun toward the new threat, giving Jake the opening he needed. His shot took the man in the head, dropping him instantly. "Rex! Here!" The dog bounded to his side, tongue lolling but eyes still alert. No blood on his coat, which was good news. Jake could hear vehicles approaching from the south, either reinforcements for the dead operatives or police responding to the gunfire. Time to go. They mounted the Harley and roared out of the warehouse district. Rex balanced behind Jake with an ease that suggested he'd done this before. A lot. Jake's mind raced as he navigated the empty streets, putting distance between them and whatever cleanup crew would sanitize the warehouse. 4 professional operators with military-grade equipment and coordination. Someone was taking this seriously now, which meant Rex was more valuable than even Jake had suspected. The dog wasn't just trained, he was a walking classified weapon. Jake's phone buzzed against his chest. He ignored it until they reached a 24-hour truck stop on the outskirts of town. Rex sniffed the air carefully before giving an all-clear signal that Jake was beginning to recognize. No immediate threats. The text message was from Dr. Chen, safe house compromised. "They're moving faster than expected. Meet me at the old grain elevator on County Road 47. Come alone, but bring the dog." Jake stared at the message, paranoia and desperation warring in his gut. Chen knew things about Rex that she shouldn't know. She'd appeared in his life at exactly the wrong moment. Every logical part of his brain screamed trap. But she was also the only lead he had to understanding what Rex really was, and why people kept trying to kill them both. Rex whined softly, pressing against Jake's leg. The dog's dark eyes held an intelligence that made Jake's skin crawl. Sometimes he swore the animal understood every word of human conversation, filed away every detail for future reference. What kind of training produced that level of awareness? "What do you think, boy? Trust the lady doctor who knows too much about military dog programs?" Rex tilted his head, considering the question with unnerving seriousness. Then he walked toward the Harley and looked back expectantly. "Yeah, that's what I figured." Jake climbed onto the bike, Rex settling behind him with practiced ease. The grain elevator was 15 miles through rural darkness, plenty of opportunities for ambush. But staying put wasn't an option either. Their enemies had found the warehouse hideout, which meant they had resources Jake couldn't match through conventional means. He needed answers, even if getting them killed him. The Harley's engine roared to life, and they disappeared into the night, hunter and hound riding toward whatever trap or salvation waited in the shadows of the grain elevator. "Son of a bitch," he breathed. Rex padded to one of the crates and sat, just as he had at the storage unit. Another signal. Jack pried open the nearest box with a crowbar he found on a workbench. Inside, nestled in foam padding, were enough assault rifles to arm a small militia. The serial numbers had been filed off, but Jack recognized the model. M4 carbines, current military issue. His hands shook as he opened another crate. Explosives. Military-grade plastique with timing devices that looked sophisticated enough to level city blocks. This wasn't some backyard militia operation. This was big. Government big. The sound of approaching vehicles made Rex's ears snap forward. Jack counted at least 2 engines, maybe more, growing louder by the second. They'd been expected. "We need to move. Now." But Rex was already in motion, leading Jack toward the back of the warehouse with the kind of purposeful navigation that suggested the dog had memorized every exit during their reconnaissance. They reached a service door just as the front entrance exploded inward with the screech of metal and the thunder of heavy boots. "Spread out. They're here somewhere." The voice carried military authority, barked with the kind of confidence that came from leading men into hostile territory. Jack pressed himself against the wall beside the door. Rex crouched low beside him, both of them invisible in the shadows. Through a gap in the metal sheeting, Jack watched 6 men in tactical gear sweep through the warehouse. They moved with military precision, weapons raised, communicating through hand signals. But these weren't government agents, at least not officially. No badges, no identifying marks, and their gear was too clean, too expensive for standard federal issue. Private contractors, the kind of operators who handled jobs that couldn't officially exist. "Target's not here," one of them called out. "But the crates have been disturbed." "He knows," another voice responded. Command was right. Rollins is remembering. Rollins. The name hit Jack like a physical blow. Nobody had called him that in 15 years, not since Afghanistan, not since the operation that had ended his military career and supposedly his life. The pieces clicked together with terrifying clarity. Rex wasn't just any military dog. He was connected to Operation Blackwater, the classified mission that Jack had been trying to forget for over a decade. The mission that had supposedly been scrubbed from existence along with everyone who knew about it. Except Jack had survived, and apparently so had Rex. "Sweep the perimeter," the team leader ordered. "He can't have gotten far. And remember, the dog is priority one. The animal has intel that could compromise everything." Rex pressed closer to Jack's leg, as if sensing the weight of revelation. This wasn't about a simple government conspiracy or stolen weapons. This was about covering up something that had happened in the mountains of Afghanistan, something that powerful people had killed to keep secret. The tactical team's footsteps echoed as they moved toward the rear of the warehouse. Jack and Rex had maybe 30 seconds before they'd be discovered. Through the service door's window, Jack spotted their escape route, a drainage culvert that ran along the building's foundation, wide enough for a man and dog to crawl through. He looked down at Rex, seeing the animal with completely new eyes. Not just a trained military dog, but a fellow survivor. A keeper of secrets that men were willing to kill for. "Ready to run again, soldier?" Rex's tail gave a single, determined wag. They moved. Rex lifted his head from where he'd been lying by Jake's feet, amber eyes fixed on something beyond the grimy windows. A low growl rumbled in the dog's throat. "We've got company," Jake whispered, ending the call and pocketing the phone. Rex was already moving, padding silently toward the warehouse's rear exit. Jake followed, grateful again for the dog's tactical instincts. Through a gap in the corrugated metal, he spotted 3 black SUVs positioning themselves around the building's perimeter. "Professional," Jake muttered, recognizing the coordinated approach. These weren't Kozlov's street thugs. Government training, government vehicles, government precision. Rex's hackles rose as footsteps echoed from multiple directions. Jake counted at least 8 different boot patterns on concrete, a full tactical team. He checked his Glock, knowing 12 rounds wouldn't be nearly enough against those odds. The dog suddenly bolted toward a stack of shipping containers, and Jake realized Rex had spotted something he'd missed, a service ladder leading to an overhead catwalk. The animal leaped impossibly high, catching the bottom rung with his front paws and somehow hauling himself up with the grace of a trained gymnast. "Show off," Jake breathed, but he was already climbing after the dog. From the catwalk, they had a bird's-eye view of the warehouse floor. The tactical team moved like shadows, communicating through hand signals, sweeping the space with practiced efficiency. Their leader, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe bun, directed the search with subtle gestures. Jake recognized her immediately. Agent Diana Voss, CIA wet work specialist. Seeing her here confirmed his worst fears. This went deeper than a simple arms deal gone wrong. Voss only handled operations that officially didn't exist. Rex pressed against Jake's leg, and he felt the dog's muscles coiling for action. The animal had identified the same thing Jake noticed. One operative had split off from the group, moving toward their position. In seconds, he'd spot the ladder. Jake made a decision that would have seemed insane a week ago. He pointed at the isolated operative and whispered a single word: "Quiet." Rex disappeared over the catwalk's edge like liquid shadow. Jake watched in fascination as the dog dropped silently behind the operative, applied what looked like a perfect sleeper hold with his jaws positioned precisely on pressure points, and lowered the unconscious man to the ground without making a sound. Military training didn't begin to cover what he'd just witnessed. Voss's voice cut through the warehouse silence. "We know you're here, Jake. The dog, too. Project Cerberus was always meant to be a matched pair, soldier and tactical canine. You're both government property. Like hell, Jake muttered, but pieces were clicking into place. The auction, Rex's appearance there, the way the dog seemed to understand not just commands but strategy. Someone had arranged for them to find each other. Rex materialized back on the catwalk, the operative's radio and sidearm carried delicately in his mouth. The dog's expression was almost smug. Jake keyed the stolen radio. Voss, long time. Her sharp laugh echoed from the speaker. Sergeant Morrison, you always were hard to kill. Who ordered the hit in Kandahar? Same person who wants you back now. General Harrison has big plans for Cerberus. The dog was just phase 1. They've been developing enhanced soldiers, stronger, faster, more obedient. You were the prototype, Jake. The trauma in Afghanistan was supposed to activate dormant conditioning. Jake's blood chilled. The nightmares, the memory gaps, the way combat felt like muscle memory even years later. Son of a bitch, bring the dog down and we'll make this easy. Refuse, and we'll take you both apart to see what makes you tick. Rex's ears flattened against his skull, a sound like grinding metal emerging from his throat. The dog understood every word. Counteroffer, Jake said into the radio. Go to hell. He dropped the radio and watched it shatter on the warehouse floor 40 feet below. Rex's tail wagged once, approval. They had perhaps 60 seconds before Voss's team regrouped and found their position. Time enough for one desperate gambit if they moved fast and trusted each other completely. Jake looked into Rex's intelligent eyes and saw his own determination reflected back. Ready to raise some hell, partner? The abandoned warehouse felt like a tomb in the pre-dawn darkness. Jake pressed his back against the cold concrete wall, feeling the rough texture through his leather jacket. Rex sat motionless beside him, ears pricked forward, every muscle coiled for action. The dog's breathing was so controlled it seemed almost mechanical. 3 hours had passed since they'd arrived at the coordinates Kowalski provided. 3 hours of watching, waiting, and seeing nothing but shadows and rust. Jake's nerves were fraying at the edges. Either this was a setup or whoever they were supposed to meet was being extremely cautious. A soft whistle echoed from somewhere deep in the building. 2 short bursts, followed by a longer one. Rex's head tilted slightly, and Jake realized the dog recognized the signal. Military. Of course it was military. Stay close, Jake whispered, though he suspected Rex understood the tactical situation better than he did. They moved through the warehouse like ghosts, Jake following Rex's lead as the dog navigated around debris and broken machinery with supernatural precision. The shepherd seemed to know exactly where to step to avoid making noise, which support beams would creak under weight, where the shadows fell thickest. The whistle came again, closer this time. Rex stopped abruptly and gave a low whine. Not distress, but communication. An answering whine echoed from the darkness ahead, and Jake felt his blood turn to ice water. Another dog. Rex wasn't unique. A figure emerged from behind a stack of shipping containers, tall, lean, with the ramrod posture of career military. A German shepherd padded silently at his side, its coat darker than Rex's, but with the same intelligent, predatory eyes. Jake Morrison, the man said. It wasn't a question. His voice carried the weight of authority, even spoken barely above a whisper. You've caused quite a stir. Who are you? Colonel Marcus Webb, retired officially. And this is Saber. He gestured to his companion, Rex's littermate. The 2 dogs regarded each other with what Jake could only describe as recognition, not the cautious circling of strangers, but the reunion of family. Rex moved forward and touched noses with Saber, tails wagging once in perfect synchronization before both animals resumed their alert positions. Kowalski said you had answers, Jake said, fighting the urge to look over his shoulder. The warehouse felt too exposed, too quiet. Webb nodded grimly. Project Cerberus, classified above top secret, started 15 years ago with the goal of creating the perfect military working dog, not just trained, engineered. Enhanced reflexes, improved intelligence, modified aggression responses, dogs that could think like soldiers, enhanced how? Genetic modification, experimental drugs, neural implants, Webb's expression darkened. We thought we were creating the future of warfare. Turns out we were creating something else entirely. A sound echoed from the warehouse entrance, metal scraping against concrete. Both dogs' heads snapped toward the noise, hackles rising. Webb's hand moved to his sidearm. "They found us," he whispered, "faster than I expected." "Who found us?" "The people who killed the Cerberus team, who've been hunting down every dog, every handler, every scientist connected to the project." Webb was already moving, using hand signals to direct Saber toward a side exit. Rex wasn't at that police auction by accident, Morrison. Someone wanted him found, wanted him to surface. Jake felt sick. I was bait. We all were. The warehouse erupted in chaos. Flashlight beams stabbed through the darkness like laser sights. Shouts echoed off the concrete walls as tactical teams poured through multiple entrances. Jake counted at least 8 voices, all coordinated, all professional. Rex was moving before Jake could react, flowing like liquid shadow toward the nearest threat. The dog made no sound as he launched himself at a figure near the loading dock, taking the man down with surgical precision. No killing bite. Rex had been trained for capture, not execution. Saber moved with identical efficiency, flanking left while Webb provided covering fire with a pistol that seemed to appear from nowhere. The 2 dogs worked like they'd been doing this their entire lives, communicating through subtle body language and positioning. "This way!" Webb shouted, grabbing Jake's arm and pulling him toward what looked like a solid wall. Up close, Jake could see it was actually a hidden panel, probably installed during the warehouse's original construction. They squeezed through into a narrow maintenance corridor, both dogs following without hesitation. Behind them, angry voices and radio chatter indicated their pursuers had discovered the bodies but lost the trail. "How did they find us so fast?" Jake gasped, trying to keep up as Webb led them through a maze of service tunnels. "Same way they've been tracking Rex since he left that auction house," Webb replied without slowing down. "The implants aren't just for enhancement. They're GPS-enabled." Jake's blood ran cold. "You mean every step you've taken, every safe house you've used, every contact you've made, they've been watching, waiting for you to lead them to people like me?" The tunnel ahead branched in 3 directions. Webb stopped, consulting what looked like a modified smartphone. His face went pale in the blue glow of the screen. "We've got a problem," he said quietly. "They're not just behind us anymore." The abandoned warehouse smelled of rust and decay, but to Jake, it might as well have been paradise. For the first time in days, he could breathe without scanning every shadow for threats. Rex lay beside him on the concrete floor, his massive head resting on his paws, though his ears remained alert. Jake examined the tactical gear they'd salvaged from the safe house before Torres's team arrived. Body armor, night vision goggles, encrypted radios, and enough ammunition to outfit a small squad. Someone had been planning for war. "Question is, boy," Jake muttered, checking the action on a modified M4 rifle, "who were they planning to fight?" Rex's ear twitched, and the dog lifted his head. Not alarm, recognition. A moment later, Jake heard it too, the distant rumble of motorcycle engines. Multiple bikes, moving fast. Jake grabbed the rifle and moved to a grimy window. Through the cracked glass he spotted them. 5 riders in leather cuts, their bikes gleaming under the streetlights. The Devil's Backbone MC patch was clearly visible on their backs. "Shh," Jake breathed. Tommy Kozlov and his crew had found them. The engines cut out. Jake watched as the bikers dismounted, Tommy's massive frame unmistakable even in the dim light. They moved with purpose, spreading out to cover the warehouse's exits. This wasn't a random search. They knew exactly where to look. Rex growled low, sensing Jake's tension. The dog's military training was evident in how he positioned himself, low profile, ready to move on command. "Easy, partner," Jake whispered. "We're about to find out if you're as good as advertised." Tommy's voice echoed across the empty space as the bikers forced entry through the main door. "Jake Morrison, time to settle old debts, brother." Jake gripped the rifle tighter. The last time he'd seen Tommy was 12 years ago, right before Jake had left the club and left behind the life that had nearly destroyed him. Some bridges weren't meant to be rebuilt. "I know you're in here," Tommy called out, his boots crunching on broken glass. "Brought some friends who want to meet that dog of yours. Seems he's worth a lot of money to certain people." The pieces clicked into place. The leak about Rex's location hadn't come from Torres or his government contacts. It had come from someone who knew Jake's history, someone who could track him through old connections. Tommy wasn't here for revenge. He was here for a payday. Jake hand-signaled Rex to move left while he went right. The dog obeyed instantly, ghosting through the shadows with predatory grace. Whatever military unit had trained, Rex had done their job well. "Come on, Jake." Tommy's voice carried a note of impatience. "Let's do this civilized. Turn over the mutt, and we forget about that little misunderstanding in Bakersfield." Bakersfield. The job that had gone sideways, the innocent bystander who'd died because Tommy couldn't follow simple instructions, the reason Jake had walked away from everything he'd known. Jake moved deeper into the warehouse, using shipping containers for cover. Through his peripheral vision, he tracked Rex's position. The dog had flanked around behind Tommy's men, moving like liquid shadow. A younger biker, one Jake didn't recognize, stepped into view 30 feet away, assault rifle sweeping the darkness. Jake lined up the shot, then hesitated. These were criminals, but they weren't soldiers. The weight of every life he'd taken in Afghanistan pressed down on him. Rex made the decision for him. The dog erupted from the shadows behind the young biker, 100+ pounds of trained muscle, taking the man down silently. Rex's jaws clamped over the rifle's barrel, twisting it from the biker's grip while his body pinned the man to the ground. No killing blow, just neutralization. "What the hell?" another voice called out, cut short as Jake moved. The rifle butt connected with the second biker's temple, dropping him instantly. Jake rolled behind a concrete pillar as automatic fire erupted from the warehouse floor, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness like deadly fireworks. "God damn it, Morrison!" Tommy roared. "Should have known you'd make this hard." Jake spotted movement in his peripheral vision, Rex, circling around for another attack. The dog moved with purpose, each step calculated. This wasn't random animal aggression, it was tactical precision. A third biker went down as Rex hit him from behind, the impact driving the man face first into a shipping container. The metallic clang echoed through the warehouse. "Boss, we need to go," one of the remaining bikers shouted. "This is going sideways fast." "Shut up," Tommy snapped back. "The dog alone is worth $2 million. We're not leaving empty-handed." $2 million. Jake processed the number as he moved to a new position. Whatever Rex represented, whatever secrets were buried in his training, powerful people were willing to pay extraordinary sums to get him back. Rex appeared beside Jake, breathing hard but uninjured. The dog's eyes met his, and Jake saw something there: intelligence, loyalty, and a shared understanding of violence. "All right, boy," Jake whispered, checking his ammunition. "Time to show Tommy what happens when you threaten family." The safe house felt like a tomb. Marcus sat hunched over the laptop, fingers flying across keys worn smooth by countless operations. The screen's glow carved harsh shadows across his weathered face as lines of encrypted data scrolled past. Beside him, Rex lay with his massive head on his paws, amber eyes tracking every movement in the room with predatory awareness. "There," Marcus breathed, highlighting a series of files buried deep in the military database. Project Cerberus, that's what they called it. Jake leaned over his shoulder, squinting at the screen. The smell of stale coffee and cigarettes clung to Marcus like a second skin. "What am I looking at?" "Your dog's entire history." Marcus clicked through classified documents, each one stamped with security clearances that should have been impossible to access. Rex wasn't just any military working dog. He was part of an experimental program, enhanced training protocols, genetic modifications, psychological conditioning. They were creating the perfect weapon. The shepherd's ears twitched at the sound of his name, but he didn't lift his head. Jake had noticed the dog seemed to understand far more than any animal should. "Says here Rex was paired with Staff Sergeant David Chen," Marcus continued. "Special operations. They deployed to Syria in 2019 for a classified mission." He paused, cursor hovering over a heavily redacted file. Mission went sideways. Chen was killed. Rex went missing. Missing how? No details. Just says the asset was recovered 3 weeks later, 30 miles from the original location. Marcus's voice dropped. But look at this. Rex was scheduled for termination upon return to base. Instead, someone falsified paperwork, had him transferred to local law enforcement, then arranged for him to end up at that auction where you found him. Jake felt ice forming in his stomach. Someone wanted him found. That's impossible. I never served with... Operation Blackwater, Marcus interrupted. March 2018. Ring any bells? The words hit Jake like a sledgehammer. Images flooded back. The compound in the Afghan mountains, the intelligence that had gone bad, the ambush that had cost 3 good men their lives. He'd spent 2 years trying to forget that mission. Chen was there, Jake whispered. He was the dog handler on the extraction team. The extraction team that got you out alive when everything went to hell. Marcus pulled up another file. Chen saved your life, Jake, and before he died in Syria, he left instructions. If anything happened to him, Rex was to be delivered to you. The shepherd rose to his feet, padding over to Jake with deliberate steps. Those intelligent amber eyes seemed to hold recognition, maybe even sadness. Jake reached out, running his fingers through the dog's thick coat. He knew, Jake said quietly. Somehow Chen knew he wasn't coming back. Which brings us to the real question, Marcus said, closing the laptop. Who wanted Chen dead, and why are they so afraid of what Rex knows? Before Jake could answer, Rex's entire body went rigid. His ears snapped forward, a snarl building in his throat as he faced the cabin's front door. The sound of approaching vehicles drifted through the walls, multiple engines moving fast. Company, Marcus muttered, already reaching for his sidearm. Jake killed the lights, plunging the room into darkness. Through the window, he could see headlights cutting through the forest, at least 4 vehicles forming a perimeter around the cabin. Red laser dots danced across the walls as sniper sights found their marks. "Back exit," Marcus whispered, but Rex was already moving, leading them toward the rear of the cabin with the silent precision of his training. The front door exploded inward as they reached the kitchen. Flashbang grenades followed, filling the air with blinding light and deafening thunder. Jake grabbed his rifle, Marcus clutching the laptop containing their only evidence. Rex bounded through the back door first, scanning for threats. Jake could hear boots pounding across the front porch, tactical radios crackling with coordinates and movement orders. These weren't local cops or even federal agents. This was a military operation. They sprinted into the tree line as automatic gunfire erupted behind them, bullets splintering bark and sending pine needles raining down like snow. Rex ran point, guiding them through the darkness with supernatural awareness of every root and fallen log. "The truck," Jake gasped, pointing toward where they'd hidden his Harley and Marcus's pickup. More vehicles were converging on their position, searchlights sweeping through the forest. Whoever had found them had resources and training that matched their own. Rex suddenly veered left away from the vehicles. Jake hesitated for a split second before following. The dog had saved his life once already tonight. He had to trust that Chen had trained his partner for exactly this scenario. Behind them, the safe house burned, taking with it any hope of a normal life. The safe house smelled like dust and old cigarettes, hidden deep in the industrial district where nobody asked questions. Rex paced the concrete floor while Jake studied the files they'd pulled from Morrison's office, his weathered hands spreading classified documents across a makeshift table. "Look at this," Jake muttered, tapping a personnel roster. Project Cerberus wasn't just about training dogs. They were breeding them, genetic modification, the whole 9 yards, creating the perfect military asset. Rex's ears perked up at his name buried in the documentation. His handler had been Staff Sergeant Maria Santos, killed in action 3 years ago in Syria, or so the official reports claimed. Santos didn't die overseas, Jake continued reading. She discovered what they were really doing with the program, using the dogs for domestic surveillance, assassination missions on American soil. When she threatened to go public, a photo slipped from the stack, a woman in military fatigues, dark hair pulled back, kneeling beside Rex when he was younger. Jake felt something twist in his chest as Rex whined softly, recognizing his former handler. The burner phone Jake had lifted from Morrison's pocket buzzed. He hesitated, then answered without speaking. Morrison. The voice was cold, professional. Status report on the asset recovery. Jake pitched his voice lower, mimicking the dead agent's tone. Target acquired, en route to extraction point. Copy that. Bring the animal to Facility 7 for immediate termination. The contractor wants this cleaned up tonight. The line went dead. Jake stared at the phone, pieces clicking into place. Contractor. This wasn't just government corruption. Someone was paying to have Rex eliminated. Rex growled low, hackles rising. Through the grimy window, Jake spotted movement in the alley. Black SUVs rolling up without headlights. Tactical teams deploying with military precision. We've been made, Jake whispered, snatching the most crucial documents. Time to go. They slipped through the back exit as the front door exploded inward. Jake had scouted 3 escape routes when they'd arrived, old habits from his ranger days. They moved through a maze of shipping containers toward his hidden motorcycle. Flashlight beams swept the shadows behind them. Rex stayed low, padding silently beside Jake's boots. The bike was 50 yards ahead when spotlights blazed to life, trapping them in a circle of harsh white light. "Stand down, Anderson," the voice echoed off the container walls. "You're interfering with national security." Jake recognized the speaker, Colonel Richard Hayes, his former commanding officer from Afghanistan, the man who'd recruited him for Black Ops missions that officially never happened. The colonel stepped into the light, flanked by 6 operators in tactical gear. "The dog is classified military property. Return the asset and walk away." "Asset?" Jake's hand drifted toward the pistol tucked in his jacket. "His name is Rex, and last I checked, slavery was still illegal. You always were too sentimental for this work." Hayes nodded to his men. "Non-lethal takedown. We need the animal alive." The first tranquilizer dart hissed past Jake's ear. Rex exploded into motion, a blur of fur and fury that took down the nearest operator before the man could reload. Jake rolled behind a container as automatic weapons chattered, concrete chips flying. Rex moved like liquid death between the containers, using shadows and angles the way his military training had taught him. Jake heard screams, confused shouts, the wet sound of flesh meeting bone. These weren't ordinary soldiers, they were special forces operators, but they'd never faced anything like Rex. Jake flanked wide, picking his shots carefully. 2 operators down before they realized they were caught in a crossfire. Hayes barked orders, trying to regroup his scattered team. A flashbang grenade rolled into the open space. Jake squeezed his eyes shut and covered his ears as the world exploded in white noise and blazing light. When his vision cleared, Rex was shaking his massive head, temporarily stunned. Hayes had a tranquilizer rifle trained on the dog. Game over. Jake's shot took the colonel in the shoulder, spinning him around. The dart went wide, shattering against concrete. Hayes stumbled but kept his feet, pulling a sidearm with his good hand. "You have no idea what you're protecting," Hayes snarled, blood seeping through his tactical vest. "That animal has killed senators, judges, foreign diplomats, all in service to his country." "Whose orders?" Jake demanded, keeping his pistol trained on his former commander. Hayes smiled through gritted teeth. "You think this stops with me? I'm just middle management. The people really running this show, they have resources you can't imagine." Rex had recovered, positioning himself to strike. The remaining operators were either dead or fled. It was just the three of them now in the harsh glare of the spotlights. Last chance, Anderson. Walk away, or join your girlfriend in an unmarked grave. Jake's blood went cold. Sarah. They had Sarah. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Phoenix squatted like a cancer against the desert landscape, its corrugated walls bleached white by decades of unforgiving sun. Jack crouched behind a rusted shipping container, watching the building through binoculars while Rex lay motionless beside him, every muscle coiled like a loaded spring. 3 guards on the perimeter, Jack whispered, lowering the glasses. Motion sensors on the north and east walls, probably more inside. Rex's ears twitched, and he lifted his head slightly, nostrils flaring. The dog had been acting strange since they'd arrived, more alert than usual, if that was even possible. Jack had learned to trust the animal's instincts completely. The drive from Tucson had taken 6 hours, following coordinates pulled from Morrison's encrypted files. Those same files revealed the true scope of Operation Nightfall, a Black Ops program designed to create the perfect soldier-animal partnerships. Rex wasn't just trained, he was engineered. His DNA altered to enhance intelligence, loyalty, and combat effectiveness. Jack's phone buzzed. Sarah's voice crackled through the earpiece. Thermal imaging shows approximately 12 heat signatures inside the main structure, 2 more in what looks like a guard tower on the west side. As if summoned by her words, Rex stood and padded forward, staying low but moving with unmistakable purpose. Jack followed, his boots silent on the sandy ground. The dog led him around the container yard to a section of fence that had been repaired with newer wire, a weak point hidden from casual observation. Rex sat and looked back at Jack, golden eyes gleaming in the afternoon light. The message was clear. This was their way in. Jack used wire cutters to create an opening just large enough for them to slip through. The moment they were inside the perimeter, Rex's demeanor shifted. His tail dropped, hackles rising slightly, and he moved with the fluid precision of a ghost. This wasn't just training. The dog was accessing memories. The panels swung inward silently, revealing a narrow corridor lit by dim fluorescence. Rex entered without hesitation, and Jack followed, his rifle ready. The hallway stretched ahead for 30 yards before branching left and right. Rex chose left, padding past doors marked with biohazard symbols and security warnings. The first guard never saw them coming. Rex emerged from the shadows like death itself, taking the man down with surgical precision. No gunshot, no scream, just sudden, efficient silence. Jack dragged the body into an empty room and continued forward. "Jack!" Sarah's voice was urgent in his earpiece. 4 vehicles just pulled up outside. Military plates. "You need to move now." Rex froze at the designation, then began to shake, not with fear, but with rage. Jack spun as doors slammed shut throughout the facility. Emergency lights bathed everything in hellish red, and the sound of boots echoed from multiple directions. "It's a trap," he said into his mic, but received only static in response. They were jamming communications. Rex moved to Jack's side, no longer the loyal pet, but every inch the engineered killer they'd created. His lips pulled back in a silent snarl, revealing teeth designed for maximum damage. "You were our greatest success," the voice taunted. "Shall we see how you perform against your newer siblings?" Metal grates slid open around the chamber's perimeter, and Jack's heart sank as dark shapes emerged from hidden passages. 4 dogs, each as large as Rex but lacking his intelligence, his soul. Their eyes held only programmed fury and the promise of violence. Jack raised his rifle as the pack began to circle. "Stay close, boy. Time to show them what freedom looks like." Rex's growl filled the chamber as the engineered killers closed in. The abandoned warehouse district stretched before them like a concrete graveyard, skeletal buildings reaching toward the grey dawn sky. Marcus guided his Harley between rusted shipping containers, Rex padding silently alongside. The dog's ears twitched at every sound, the distant rumble of early morning traffic, the screech of metal settling in the wind. "Easy, boy," Marcus whispered, cutting the engine. They'd been riding for 3 hours since fleeing the motel, following back roads and industrial corridors to stay off the grid. His shoulder throbbed where shrapnel had grazed it during their escape, but the bleeding had stopped. Rex suddenly froze, hackles rising. A low growl rumbled in his throat as his nose worked the air. Marcus's hand instinctively moved to the Glock tucked in his waistband, one of several weapons they'd liberated from Blackwood's men. The sound came from behind them. Footsteps on gravel, deliberately soft but not soft enough. Marcus spun, drawing his weapon, as 3 figures emerged from behind a shipping container. Military bearing, tactical gear, weapons trained on him with professional precision. Marcus Kane. The voice belonged to a woman with steel-grey hair and cold blue eyes. "You've led us quite a chase. Funny thing about ownership," Marcus said. "I got papers that say otherwise." Voss smiled without warmth. Those papers were part of an illegal operation conducted by Major Blackwood. Operation Cerberus was never officially sanctioned. "Then why are you here?" "Because Blackwood wasn't entirely wrong about the program's potential. We've decided to continue his work under proper oversight." Her gaze fixed on Rex. "The dog represents years of training and millions in investment. We can't allow that asset to remain in civilian hands." "What about the other dogs?" Marcus asked, buying time while scanning for escape routes. "The ones Blackwood executed?" "Acceptable losses. Science requires sacrifice." Voss's casual dismissal sent ice through Marcus's veins. "Just as your sacrifice will be acceptable to maintain operational security." The operative to her left shifted slightly, adjusting his grip on an assault rifle. Marcus caught the movement and knew they were seconds from opening fire. That's when Rex moved. The dog exploded forward like a guided missile, covering 20 feet in a heartbeat. The first operative's scream cut short as 80 pounds of trained fury collided with his chest, jaws clamping down on his weapon arm. The rifle spun away across the concrete. Marcus rolled behind a concrete pillar as automatic weapons fire erupted. Bullets sparked off metal and concrete, filling the air with deadly fragments. He blind-fired twice around cover, forcing the remaining operatives to seek shelter. Rex had already released his first target and vanished into the maze of containers, his dark coat blending with shadows. The wounded operative writhed on the ground, clutching a mangled arm. "Spread out," Voss commanded. "Take the dog alive if possible, but kill Kane." Marcus sprinted for a gap between containers, Rex appearing at his side like a phantom. They moved together through the industrial labyrinth, the dog's enhanced senses guiding them past ambush points and dead ends. Behind them, radio chatter echoed off concrete walls. Visual on target, negative, lost him. "Check Sector 7. They emerged near an abandoned loading dock. Marcus spotted a drainage tunnel partially hidden by debris, urban camouflage that might buy them precious minutes. He whistled softly. The signal Rex had learned meant follow close. The tunnel was cramped and reeked of stagnant water, but it led away from their pursuers. They crawled through darkness for what felt like hours before emerging in a storm drain beneath an overpass. Traffic thundered overhead, the city waking up, oblivious to the shadow war being fought in its forgotten spaces. Marcus pulled out the encrypted phone he'd taken from Blackwood's operation. Time to call in the one ally he had left, Detective Sarah Chen. She'd been skeptical of his story, but the evidence was mounting too high to ignore. Rex pressed against his leg, offering warmth and solidarity. Looking into those intelligent eyes, Marcus saw something that chilled him more than Voss's threats. The dog wasn't just trained for military operations, he was engineered for them. Enhanced reflexes, increased aggression, tactical awareness that bordered on supernatural. How many others were out there? How far did this conspiracy reach? His phone buzzed with an incoming message from an unknown number. "We have Detective Chen, Pier 47, 1 hour. Come alone or she dies." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices. Rex whined softly, sensing his distress. Looks like we're going fishing, boy. The abandoned warehouse echoed with the sound of Rex's low growl as Jake pressed his back against the corrugated metal wall. Through the grimy windows, he could see the black SUVs forming a perimeter around the building. Colonel Morrison had found them faster than expected. "Easy, boy," Jake whispered, checking his ammunition. 3 clips left, plus whatever he could scavenge from the dead operatives they'd left behind at the motel. Not great odds against what looked like a full tactical team. The first breach came from the north entrance, a controlled explosion that sent the heavy door flying inward. Smoke grenades followed, filling the space with thick grey clouds. Jake had expected this. Military precision, overwhelming force. Morrison wasn't taking chances. The smoke was clearing too fast. Jake spotted the industrial fans mounted near the ceiling. Someone was controlling them remotely. Morrison was adapting, taking away their tactical advantage. Smart bastard. "Rex! To me!" The dog materialized at his side, blood on his muzzle but moving smoothly. No injuries Jake could see. They needed to relocate before the visibility improved completely. The mezzanine level offered better sightlines and cover. Jake bounded up the metal stairs 3 at a time, Rex beside him. From above, he could see the full scope of Morrison's operation. 12 men in full tactical gear, night vision, coordinated movement patterns. This wasn't a capture mission anymore. This was a cleanup operation. Jake's radio crackled, Sarah's voice cutting through static. "Jake, I'm in position on the south side. I count 4 more vehicles incoming, ETA 3 minutes, 16 more hostiles." The math was getting worse by the second. "Can you create a distraction?" Jake asked, sighting down on the team leader coordinating movement below. Already on it. The explosion came from the parking area. Sarah had found something combustible. One of the SUVs went up in a fireball that lit the night sky orange. Jake used the moment when every head turned toward the blast to take his shot. The team leader dropped, and chaos erupted below. Without coordination, the operatives fell back on individual training instead of unit cohesion. Jake picked off 2 more before they found cover behind concrete support pillars. Rex was already moving, using a maintenance ladder to reach the ground level. The dog understood urban warfare better than most humans. Height advantage was temporary, but mobility was survival. Jake followed, sliding down the ladder as bullets sparked off metal around him. He hit the ground rolling, came up behind a stack of shipping pallets. Rex had taken position 30 yards away, creating a crossfire that split the operatives' attention. The reinforcements were arriving. Jake could hear vehicles in the distance, getting closer. Time to shift tactics from defense to offense. Rex, pattern 7. It was a gamble. Pattern 7 was pure aggression, coordinated assault designed to break enemy lines through shock and violence. Jake had no idea if Rex actually knew the command or if he was making it up, but the dog responded instantly. They moved together, Jake laying down covering fire while Rex flanked wide, using the support pillars for concealment. The operatives tried to maintain their positions, but fighting a 2-front assault in close quarters neutralized most of their equipment advantages. Jake's rifle clicked empty. He drew his sidearm, put 2 rounds into an operative trying to flank Rex, then grabbed the man's rifle. Military grade, full auto, better than anything he'd carried since Afghanistan. The warehouse was becoming a killing ground. Bodies in tactical gear lay scattered between concrete pillars and machinery. Jake counted 6 down, maybe 7. Rex emerged from behind an overturned forklift, moving smoothly toward the next target. Then the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, casting everything in hellish red. Jake's night vision was compromised, but Rex moved like the darkness meant nothing. Enhanced senses, probably part of whatever program had created him. Morrison's voice echoed through a bullhorn outside. "This ends now, Reaper. Walk out, and the girl lives." Jake's blood went cold. They had Sarah. The abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of town stood like a monument to industrial decay, its broken windows reflecting the pale dawn light. Marcus crouched behind a rusted shipping container, Ghost pressed against his side, both of them watching the building through the scope of his rifle. 3 black SUVs were parked outside, and armed figures moved like shadows between the loading docks. "This is it, boy," Marcus whispered, his fingers finding the reassuring weight of the flash drive in his tactical vest. "Everything we've been through leads to this moment." Ghost's ears twitched at the sound of his voice, yellow eyes never leaving the warehouse. The dog had been different since their encounter with Agent Collins, more focused, more lethal, like he understood the stakes better than any human could. Marcus's phone buzzed. Sarah's voice crackled through the encrypted channel. "I'm in position on the north side. I count 8 hostiles, maybe more inside." "You sure about this plan?" "No," Marcus admitted, checking his ammunition one final time. "But it's the only shot we have at ending this." The plan was simple in concept, suicidal in execution. While Sarah created a distraction, Marcus and Ghost would breach the warehouse and locate Director Hartwell. The flash drive contained enough evidence to bring down Operation Cerberus, but only if they could get it to the right people. Hartwell was their ticket to making sure the truth reached the highest levels of government. An explosion echoed from the north side of the building. Sarah's handiwork with the C4 they'd liberated from Collins's safe house. Immediately, 4 of the guards rushed toward the sound, automatic weapons at the ready. "Go!" Marcus breathed. He sprinted across the open ground, Ghost matching his pace perfectly. They reached the loading dock just as the remaining guards realized the explosion was a diversion. Marcus put 2 rounds center mass into the nearest operative before diving behind a concrete pillar as return fire chewed chunks from the wall. Ghost didn't wait for orders. The dog launched himself through a broken window, disappearing into the warehouse like a phantom. Marcus heard shouts of alarm, then screaming, then sudden silence. He moved through the loading bay, stepping over bodies that Ghost had left in his wake. The dog's military training was on full display, precise, efficient, utterly ruthless. Each target had been neutralized with surgical precision. The warehouse interior was a maze of abandoned machinery and storage containers. Marcus advanced methodically, rifle ready, following the occasional bark or growl that told him where Ghost was clearing the next section. They moved like a practice team, anticipating each other's actions with an almost supernatural synchronization. "Second floor," Sarah's voice crackled through his earpiece. "I see movement in what looks like an office complex." Marcus found the stairs and climbed slowly, Ghost padding silently beside him. The metal steps groaned under his weight, but there was no help for stealth now. Speed was their only advantage. The office level had been converted into a command center. Banks of monitors lined the walls, displaying feeds from surveillance cameras across the city. Maps covered a conference table, marked with red pins that Marcus recognized as locations where other Cerberus assets had been stationed. Director Hartwell stood at the far end of the room, his back to the door. He was older than Marcus had expected, silver-haired and wearing an expensive suit that seemed out of place in the industrial setting. 2 guards flanked him, but they looked nervous, unsure. "I was wondering when you'd arrive," Hartwell said, without turning around. "The infamous Marcus Wade. You've caused us considerable trouble." "Not nearly as much as you've caused the country," Marcus replied, keeping his rifle trained on the director's back. "But that ends today." Hartwell finally turned, revealing cold grey eyes and a thin smile. "Does it? You're outnumbered, outgunned, and frankly, out of your depth. Did you really think we wouldn't prepare for this contingency?" The monitors around the room flickered, then displayed new images. Sarah, surrounded by soldiers in a parking garage. She was on her knees, hands zip-tied behind her back, a gun pressed to her head. "Surrender now and she lives," Hartwell continued. "Refuse, and I give the order to execute her. You have 10 seconds to decide." Marcus felt Ghost tense beside him, the dog sensing the shift in dynamics. His mind raced through options, calculating odds, searching for an angle that didn't end with Sarah's death. "You know what the beautiful thing about military-trained animals is?" Hartwell asked conversationally. "They're predictable, loyal to a fault. They'll die for their handlers without question." Marcus's finger tightened on the trigger, but Hartwell raised a hand, Before you do something rash, perhaps you should know who's really behind Operation Cerberus. Who gave the orders that created your four-legged friend there? The director's smile widened, predatory and knowing. Tell me, Marcus, what do you remember about your last mission in Afghanistan? The warehouse district stretched before them like a concrete wasteland, shadows cutting sharp angles between the industrial buildings. Marcus killed the Harley's engine 2 blocks out, coasting to a stop behind a rusted shipping container. Rex immediately went rigid beside him, ears swiveling toward a structure that looked identical to the dozen others surrounding it. "That's it, isn't it?" Marcus whispered, studying the seemingly abandoned building. Rex's low growl confirmed his suspicion. The place looked dead. Broken windows, weeds sprouting through cracked pavement, graffiti tags covering the lower walls. But Marcus had learned to see past appearances. The subtle signs were there if you knew where to look: fresh tire tracks in the dirt, a faint hum of generators, and the almost imperceptible glint of surveillance cameras disguised as debris. Marcus checked his weapons one final time. The modified .45 sat heavy in its shoulder holster, 2 spare magazines tucked against his ribs, a tactical knife rode on his belt, and he'd jury-rigged an explosive device from materials scavenged during their desperate flight through the city. Not much firepower against a Black Ops facility, but he'd survived worse odds. Rex pressed against his leg, and Marcus looked down to see the dog studying him with those unnaturally intelligent eyes. For a moment, the weight of what they were walking into hit him. This animal had already sacrificed everything: his handler, his unit, his purpose, to expose the truth. Now Marcus was asking him to risk the final roll of the dice. "Last chance to walk away, partner," he murmured, scratching behind Rex's ears. No shame in it. Rex's response was to rise and pad silently toward the warehouse, every line of his body screaming predator. They approached from the east, using the skeletal remains of construction equipment as cover. Rex moved like a ghost, each paw placement deliberate and soundless. Marcus followed, grateful for the stealth training that came flooding back despite the years of trying to forget it. The first perimeter guard never saw them coming. Rex appeared from the shadows like death itself, taking the man down with surgical precision, unconscious but alive. Marcus zip-tied the guard's hands and continued forward, following Rex's lead as the dog navigated an invisible maze of sensor fields and camera blind spots. The second guard posed more of a challenge, positioned near the main entrance with clear sightlines in multiple directions. Marcus was calculating angles when Rex suddenly bolted forward, drawing the guard's attention and fire. The suppressed rifle chattered quietly as bullets tracked the sprinting animal, but Rex moved with impossible grace, zigzagging through the gunfire like he could read the shooter's intentions. Marcus used the distraction to circle wide, coming up behind the guard as Rex disappeared around a corner. The man never heard the approach, too focused on reacquiring his target. Marcus's knife found the gap between body armor and helmet, and the guard dropped without a sound. "Show off," Marcus muttered as Rex reappeared, tongue lolling in what looked suspiciously like amusement. The warehouse's main floor stretched before them, a cavern of shadows broken by pools of harsh fluorescent light. But the real operation lay below ground. Marcus could feel it in the building's bones, the subtle vibrations of heavy machinery and human activity filtering up through the concrete. They found the access point near the rear of the building, a reinforced door marked with biohazard symbols that led to a stairwell descending into the earth. Rex's hackles rose as they approached, his nose twitching at scents Marcus couldn't detect. "Chemical weapons?" Marcus guessed. Rex's whine suggested something worse. The stairwell was a kill zone waiting to happen. Narrow confines, limited visibility, nowhere to retreat if things went sideways. Marcus pulled the improvised explosive from his jacket, a crude device that would level half the building if triggered. Insurance in case they didn't make it out. As they descended, the sterile smell of a laboratory grew stronger, mixed with something organic and wrong. Emergency lighting cast everything in hellish red, and the walls seemed to pulse with the rhythm of hidden machinery. Rex suddenly froze, head cocked toward a sound Marcus couldn't hear. Then footsteps echoed from above, multiple sets moving fast and coordinated. Their window was closing. The basement level opened into a nightmare of medical equipment and holding cells, banks of monitors displaying vital signs and test data. But it was the occupants of those cells that made Marcus's blood run cold. Children, some barely teenagers, connected to 4 lines and monitoring equipment. Their eyes held the same unnatural intelligence as Rex's. "Jesus Christ," Marcus breathed. "They're making more of them. Human subjects." Rex moved between the cells with desperate urgency, and Marcus understood. This wasn't just about exposing corruption anymore. These kids were running out of time, and the people responsible were 30 seconds behind them and closing fast. The final confrontation would happen here, surrounded by the evidence of unthinkable crimes. Marcus chambered around and prepared to make his last stand count. The warehouse erupted in chaos as Marcus dove behind a shipping container, bullets sparking off metal around him. Rex had already vanished into the maze of industrial equipment, his dark form becoming one with the shadows. The smell of gunpowder and rust filled the air as Blackwood's remaining operatives spread out, their tactical lights cutting through the gloom like deadly fireflies. "You can't run forever, Kane," Blackwood's voice echoed from somewhere in the darkness. "We know about the drive. We know what you've seen." Marcus checked his clip. 3 rounds left. Not enough for what was coming. He'd counted at least 6 hostiles when they'd breached the entrance, and Blackwood made 7. The warehouse was their killing ground now, but Rex was evening the odds. A scream pierced the air from the far end of the building, followed by the distinctive thud of a body hitting concrete. Rex was hunting. Marcus used the distraction to move, keeping low as he navigated between rusted machinery and stacked crates. His shoulder burned where shrapnel had caught him during the initial breach, but adrenaline kept him moving. Years of running had led to this moment, time to stop being prey. "Target moving, Sector 4, a voice crackled over radio static. The tactical light swung toward Marcus's position a split second before he rolled left, the concrete where he'd been crouched exploding in a shower of dust and fragments. He came up firing, his shot taking the operative center mass. The man dropped, his weapon clattering across the floor. 2 rounds left. Another scream echoed through the warehouse, this one cut short. Rex was a ghost, striking from the darkness with surgical precision. These men had trained to fight soldiers, not a 100-pound predator that moved like liquid death. "Regroup at the south entrance," Blackwood commanded, his voice tighter now. "Kane's got an animal with him, some kind of attack dog." Marcus almost smiled. They still didn't understand what Rex really was. Movement caught his eye, a figure creeping along the elevated walkway above. Marcus tracked him with his pistol, waiting. The operative paused, scanning the floor below, unaware that he'd become the hunted. Rex appeared behind him like smoke given form, rising from the shadows of the walkway with impossible silence. The man had time for one startled gasp before 80 pounds of muscle and fury drove him over the railing. He hit the concrete with a wet crack that ended any chance of getting back up. "This is impossible," one of the remaining operatives whispered, his voice carrying in the sudden quiet. "Nothing's impossible," Marcus called out, moving again as muzzle flashes lit up his previous position. "You just never fought anyone who had something real to fight for." He thought of Sarah, of the life she'd never get to live because of Blackwood's ambitions, of Rex, bred for war but choosing loyalty, of all the other victims whose names would never be known if this conspiracy stayed buried. A shadow moved to his right, another operative trying to flank him. Marcus waited until the man committed to his approach, then stepped out with his remaining 2 rounds. Both found their mark. Now it was just him, Rex, and Blackwood in the darkness. Quite the reunion. Blackwood's voice came from directly ahead, conversational now that his team was gone. "I always wondered what happened to my best operative. Turns out he was playing house with a veterinarian." Marcus felt Rex's presence nearby, a warm weight against his consciousness. The dog was waiting for his signal. "Sarah died because you couldn't let the past stay buried," Marcus replied, moving slowly through the shadows. "That's on you. Sarah died because you forgot who you used to be. We made you into something perfect, Cain, a weapon without conscience or hesitation, but you threw it all away for what? A normal life. The best thing I ever did." Blackwood's laugh was cold. "Even now, even with her dead and you running for your life, was it worth it?" Marcus stepped into a shaft of moonlight streaming through a broken skylight, making himself visible. Blackwood emerged from behind a concrete pillar 50 feet away, rifle trained on Marcus's chest. "Every second of it," Marcus said. Blackwood's finger tightened on the trigger just as Rex struck from the blind spot, a dark blur that crossed the distance in heartbeats. Blackwood's shot went wide as he spun, but Rex was already on him, jaws clamping down on the rifle barrel and wrenching it aside with bone-jarring force. Marcus was moving before Blackwood hit the ground, closing the distance as man and dog wrestled for control. Blackwood managed to draw a sidearm, pressing it against Rex's ribs. The warehouse fell silent, except for the sound of Marcus's boots on concrete. "It's over," Marcus said, standing above them both. Blackwood looked up at him, blood running from where Rex's claws had found purchase. "You think this ends with me? There are others. There are always others. Then I'll be ready."